Welcome to the city of Lewisville, which rests in Denton County, Texas. Population 111,822 as of the 2020 census. Now, population numbers are going to become very significant as we proceed, so keep that in mind. Like many private and governmental organizations, the city of Lewisville chose to use the advent of George Floyd's death in 2020 as an excuse to push diversity, equity, and inclusion agendas forward as a means of virtue signaling and societal atonement. This resulted in the mayor's initiative called Listen, Learn, Lead. Listen, Learn, Lead, or as I'll refer to it as Triple L for brevity and comedy's sake, generated a list of achievements for city government to fulfill commensurate to a DEI philosophy. Some of those published goals will become relevant very shortly. Earlier this year, Lewisville held their 2024 City Council retreat, which involved a series of reports and presentations from officials on city business and other affairs. A portion of this concerned the primary outgrowth of the Triple L initiative, that being the Lewisville Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Project, or Jedi. Now, for trivia's sake, the Jedi variant for DEI initiatives was briefly very popular a few years ago, but fell out of favor relatively quickly after Scientific American magazine, of all things, warned against its usage, warning that associating diversity work with a corporate brand and fictional organization from the Star Wars films was detrimental to the overall goals of DEI. This ends the trivia portion of the video. A link to the full Jedi segment of Lewisville's City Council retreat is below, but I wanted to focus in on one particular portion, a set of exchanges between council members that I think really illustrate the disconnect between the stated intentions of diversity, equity, and inclusion and its inevitable results. So let's listen in as Tad Phillips, the head of human resources for the city of Lewisville, describes the crown jewel of their hiring practices in recent years.
And then last, internally, really proud of the work that this team has done in the years leading up to before even I was here, was on the employment side. We were recognized by the North Texas Diversity Council a few months ago, the Corporate Leadership Award, and that was because of our recruitment process. And just to recap what that is, coming out of Listen, Learn, and Lead, what we do in order to minimize hiring, hidden bias is our hiring supervisors, when they initially review job applications, they cannot see names. The names are hidden during their screening process of candidates. Only after they have reviewed qualifications of candidates and identify ones that they want to have identified as their smaller, narrowed list do they ever see a name.
So, obscuring job candidate names from the initial application review, focusing entirely on a candidate's education, skills, and work experience before moving them to the next round of consideration. In other words, a meritorious process. No risk of giving someone an advantage over name recognition for, say, nepotism. No risk of someone deriving an idea of a candidate's race or ethnicity to either elevate or denigrate them, consciously or otherwise. So, sounds great. And I mean that sincerely. Hire the best people for the position based on merit. Got it.
Then once they look at those candidates, before they bring them in face-to-face, they also do a phone interview. So there's no visuals on the candidate before they narrow it down to the relatively smaller group that they bring face-to-face.
All right. Stage 2 is a faceless phone interview. Again, sounds fine. Each step so far is meant to filter out as much irrelevant bias as is feasible and, again, focus on merit. Got it.
And so we've been doing this for the last few years. I would say it's not something every employer out there is doing, and really proud that the North Texas Diversity Council saw fit to recognize us for that.
So it's an award-winning method of bias reduction in hiring practices. Lewisville is noted as a model for city governments in Texas. Sounds great. Now we're going to hear from Mayor T.J. Gilmore, who has a very pertinent question regarding this celebrated method of employee selection.
Yes, sir.
Tad, do we have any measures of impact of what that's done or what that's changed?
It's a great segue into the next slide. Glad you asked.
Any measures of impact? What has this done, and what has this changed? Excellent question from the mayor. Now, if it were me, and I was using a blind method of candidate filtration and leaving as much bias as possible aside from the consideration, save for their relevant skills, education, and work experience, what kind of metrics would I expect to be used to measure the success of those hires? Well, when it comes to city government, and full disclosure, I have never worked in city government, so this is just me spitballing, I would think of things like customer service. Are issues in the city being addressed to the satisfaction of the residents better now than they were before the hiring practices were initiated? Presumably, the residents of the city are going to notice and appreciate a higher quality of interaction with city employees if only the best of the best are being hired. Or maybe a reduction in the amount of overtime that is being paid out. More skilled and experienced employees would, conceivably, lead to a more efficient and timely workflow. This would improve the city's bottom line, which can be a very good and desirable metric when showing off the success of governmental policies. These are just the first two ideas that pop to my mind. But again, I am a layman. So, by what metric or metrics is the City Council of Lewisville using to measure the impact and success of their award-winning process of bias-eliminating, merit-focused hiring?
I'll getting to that question. Another piece of what came out of Listen, Learn, Lead is that Human Resources provides annual reporting, and we do one better than that. So I am giving you your annual report right now, but thanks to our friends with the ITS team, we also do consistent, continuous reporting on our website, on the HR page of our website for hiring, promotion, demographics. And so that's what this report is showing. Is this is a snapshot in time. They may look slightly different if you went on the website today, but as of March 13th, what this is showing, and you showed you all some similar data last year, don't expect you to specifically remember it. What you see on the top chart is a focus on what are the demographics of our residents in Lewisville, and then what are the demographics of our employee base. And then on the bottom, it's looking at, and so you see some differences there, some differences that are long-standing. I will say, if I looked at the same chart a year ago to today, we more closely resemble our community today than we did a year ago, but it's small incremental improvements or changes.
Improvements or changes. The racial demographic split between residents and city employees is the metric by which the council is measuring success. And again, these current numbers are an improvement over numbers from previous years. Thus, at least by unavoidable implication, the city of Lewisville is using their racial population demographics as benchmarks for success in building the racial makeup of their workforce. The blind hiring policies, touted as focusing on merit over bias, apparently culminates in, quite literally and bizarrely, surface-level goals. Got it.
And then on the bottom, employee demographic trends, that's again showing the same employee base on the left, but then we go to what have our hires and our promotions look like over the last 12 months. And so we continue to see a trend in both cases. You see more diverse results in both our hires in the last 12 months and our promotions in the last 12 months in relation to our overall employee population.
Not to be outdone in the cognitive dissonance between method and measurement in the first graph, Lewisville decides to double down on some decidedly questionable hiring goals by highlighting not only the overall racial makeup of their workforce, but now who they have hired and who they have promoted in the last 12 months based solely on skin color. Not on the basis of performance, not on the basis of merit, only on the basis of race. As a brief reminder, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 has something to say about what you are and are not allowed to take into consideration when making employment decisions in the United States. From the text of the title, quote, "It shall be an unlawful employment practice for an employer, 1. To fail or refuse to hire or to discharge any individual, or otherwise to discriminate against any individual with respect to his compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of such individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin, or 2. To limit, segregate, or classify his employees or applicants for employment in any way which would deprive or tend to deprive any individual of employment opportunities or otherwise adversely affect his status as an employee because of such individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin." Unquote. Now, I am not a lawyer, or a civil rights expert, or a constitutional scholar. But by touting progress in their hiring initiatives using racial percentages in their workforce population and promotion outcomes, by measuring improvement based on how those numbers come closer to parity with the city's residential population, one could be forgiven for thinking the city has adopted a racial quota system for their employment decisions. One can easily be forgiven for thinking so, in fact, because just a few minutes later into this presentation, Deputy Mayor Patrick Kelly feels the need to speak up and attempts to run cover for the obvious implications being made.
Can we go back to slide 24? Is that possible, real quick? So a lot of times when people hear diversity, equity, and inclusion, they think immediately of percentage goals, and that's not what this is trying to say, right? We're just looking at this. So good. So that's
sir. This is just a reflection. It's showing where we're at, and I'm just indicating to you directionally what's happening. But no, there's no specific expectations.
And I love that, because this can be correlated but not causally related. There can be things beyond implicit bias that causes this sort of thing to happen. So I think that's just an important point to drive home for people that are listening, that these are not goals. We look at it and we take that as an input, but this is not, we don't feel the need, we're not driving toward exact representation across these different groups.
That's right. Okay. That's exactly correct. And bottom line, we want to hire the best people for each job. Awesome. But this just gives us a chance to view it from a particular lens and just make sure we're considerate of who all is here. But yes, sir, that's exactly right.
Thank you.
Yes, when people talk about DEI, they often do think of percentages. Racial percentages, as the Human Resources Department has showcased here. Oh, but they're not goals or anything, despite the fact that the title of the very slide in question reads, Goals Employee. Again, Lewisville isn't citing numbers on job performance, cost efficiencies, or resident satisfaction. Just race. Only race. It should be noted, however, that the deputy mayor is correct when he said,
this can be correlated but not causally related. There can be things beyond implicit bias that causes this sort of thing to happen.
And it is true. The differences in population demographics compared to city employee demographics may indeed be explained by any number of other factors, and are not necessarily a direct result of the blind hiring policies. However, comparisons between resident and employee races and the hiring and promotion of employees by race were the only evidence of impact and improvement presented by human resources. Whatever the truth behind those racial statistics, shifting those racial statistics closer to parity has clearly been cited as a motivating factor of the council's efforts. But wait, there's more! Another law that we should remind ourselves of is Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Title VI reads, quote, "No person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance." Unquote. As just one example, the city of Lewisville, as a municipal entity, received funding from the federal government program called the Community Development Block Grant to the tune of $762,000 in 2023. And so, given the fungibility of money, the city of Lewisville would seem to fall within the umbrella of Title VI as a recipient of federal financial assistance. Again, I am no lawyer, but assuming that is to be the case, let's listen to the Director of Community Relations and Tourism for the City of Lewisville, James Kuhnke, tell us about booking talent for local concert events.
Coming out of Listen, Learn, Lead, they did ask that we make a goal that our performers at concerts in the festival, they didn't say the grand, they said at the festivals, 30% of those be fronted by a woman or person of color. And that can be challenging sometimes, especially women fronted for some reason in this market can be hard to find. But we've done it, and each of the past 2 years we've been more than 50% of bands fronted by a female or person of color. So we have hit that mark and exceeded it, and we intend to continue doing so.
So, 50% of their hired bands are fronted explicitly by women or people of color, which exceeds the target percentile goal of 30%. One can only guess as to how many bands were rejected from invitation or employment by the city at these concert events based solely on the fact that their front person was the wrong gender or the wrong color. In any case, there you have it. Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the city of Lewisville, Texas. A friendly, casual, and dismissive attitude towards, if not civil rights laws themselves, then certainly the spirit in which they were created in the first place. Call it DEI, call it Jedi, call it DEIB. All of it is rooted in the injustices of unlawful discrimination delivered with a poisonous smile. It speaks to a lesson we, as a nation, and the institutions and governments within it, purportedly learned half a century ago. But apparently, we still need a reminder. Now, if you like this kind of content, please let me know with a like or a comment, subscribe, and do share this out to your friends on social media. You, the audience, are truly the best algorithm. And, as always, thank you for watching.